But it's not a full-scale emergency.
They didn't think it was serious, but this was an aircraft that was about to go across the North Atlantic.
Before landing, they have to take precautions.
We must dump some fuel. Maybe do that in this area during descent.
Are you able to take a turn back to the south, or do you want to stay closer to the airport?
Stand by short, stand by short.
No sense of urgency in the pilots' voices. There was no way of knowing that the situation on the aircraft was changing.
We are between 12 and 5,000 feet. We are declaring emergency now at time 0124.
Swiss Air 111, check you're cleared to start fuel dump.
As the pilot tries to speak, he's abruptly cut off. With all contact lost, Bill Pickrell can only watch the radar as the plane flies erratically out to sea and then disappears.
What followed was about a little more than 5 minutes, almost 6 minutes of probably the most helpless feeling you can imagine. I feared the worst. I expected that he was in the water.
Swiss Air 111 has plummeted into the Atlantic Ocean 6 miles off the coast of Nova Scotia.
Heard a loud, it wasn't even an explosion, it was almost like an air wave sort of hit the top of the house and the windows shook.
Local people rush to help. Among those watching the news is Larry Vance of the Canadian Transportation Safety Board.
Came on newsflash over the television, and I said to my wife, "Ooh, this sounds like one I might be involved in," so I waited for the phone call.
The investigation begins immediately. The team is based at a fishing village, Peggy's Cove.
The mood at Peggy's Cove was quite somber. I mean, you got 200 bodies out in the ocean.
Well, for us in the safety board, it was the biggest investigation that we ever launched, the biggest one we ever participated in.
The black boxes are quickly found, but they solve nothing. For some reason, the tapes cut out 6 minutes before the crash. The key to the mystery lies on the seabed. When the plane hit the ocean, it broke into millions of fragments. Each has to be found, raised, and inspected. But the wreckage lies at a depth of 180 feet, and it will take a massive salvage operation to retrieve it. To solve the mystery of Swiss Air 111, investigators must salvage millions of pieces of wreckage. It's an immense operation, costing over $30 million. After 15 months, they recover 98% of the plane. In a hangar, each piece is carefully washed, sorted, and examined. But the first clue is the pilot's own words.
Smoke in the cockpit, request immediate return.
Much of the wreckage is blackened. There is molten plastic in the cockpit. The controls are burnt and the wiring destroyed. Evidence of a catastrophic fire, and the likely reason why the data recorders stopped working 6 minutes before the crash. To pinpoint the source of the fire, the team reassembles the front 30 feet of the plane.
Well, we reconstructed the wreckage on the frame to understand the extent of the fire damage. We were trying to delineate where it started and where it ended.
The reconstruction reveals that the fire began above the cockpit, in an area known as the attic, invisible to the crew.
A hidden fire in an aircraft is one of the more dangerous things that you can have happen to you as a pilot or as a passenger. If you have a fire in an aircraft that you can't detect, that fire will, unless for some reason it self-extinguishes, the fire will spread through the aircraft and eventually it will bring the aircraft down.
If the fire started in the attic, then the most likely cause is electrical. 150 miles of wiring runs through the plane. Thousands of them lie in the attic. After 4 years of careful scrutiny, they find the source of the ignition. A piece of wire from the in-flight entertainment system. Investigators believe that 2 wires chafed on a metal bracket, wearing away the insulation. An electric arc from the exposed copper then sparks the fire. The blaze destroys vital instrument cables. Out of control, the plane plummets into the sea. But the only material near the wiring is the plane's insulation blanket, and it's not supposed to burn. So how did the fire spread? Investigators zero in on the flame-proof material that covers the insulation. It's called metallized mylar. The industry standard tests, which are demonstrated here, show that when exposed to a flame, mylar shrinks but does not ignite. But there is a question mark about the test itself. There had been reports that despite the tests, metallized mylar was, in fact, flammable. The FAA devises a tougher test that more accurately replicates a plane on fire. It's called the Radiant Panel Heat Test. The results are shocking. Mylar burns.
We were very much concerned, and we were concerned that there might be other incidents, and because of that, the FAA issued an airworthiness directive that would require the actual removal of metallized mylar from over 700 airplanes.
Metallized mylar is yanked from all aircraft. Scientists look for a replacement that won't burn. They decide on a material called Kapton, a variation on the insulation used on electric wiring.
Chemically, it has a makeup that produces a char when it is exposed to heat. This char is a factor in its fire resistance because a char prevents the material from igniting and burning.
Kapton passes both the Bunsen burner test and the Radiant Panel Heat Test. It does not burn in either. But to be sure, the FAA subjects it to the ultimate test, 15 seconds in an 1800-degree flame. At these temperatures, the plane itself would melt, but the Kapton is only charred.
The most important thing is that once the flame was removed, it did not propagate a fire and it self-extinguished immediately.
Across America, this remarkable material, which lines the entire fuselage of a plane, will ensure that the horror of a hidden fire will never be repeated. Los Angeles International Airport, February 2nd, 1991, 5:58 p.m., the busiest time of the day in the control tower. US Air 1493 is en route from Syracuse, New York. As it makes its final approach, the pilot confirms clearance to land with air traffic control.
Yes, Air 1493 for the left side, 24 left.
Yes, Air 1493 for the land runway 24 left.
The pilot's visibility is severely impaired. He is landing into the setting sun. But then he sees something on the runway.
What the hell?
When emergency crews arrive on the scene, they make a chilling discovery.
Firefighters first on the scene didn't even know there was a second plane involved for at least 4 minutes.
Then observed the propeller, realized that the propeller didn't belong to a 737, and then went back out on the airport to look for the rest of that airplane.
The propeller belongs to a SkyWest turboprop, which was sitting on runway 24 left, awaiting clearance for takeoff. All 12 people on the turboprop are killed. 22 die on the 737. Within hours, crash investigator John Cox is on the scene.
What we saw when we went out there was a very badly damaged 737, both due to the impact as well as the ensuing fire, and the crumpled Embraer up underneath the Boeing. It was a very tough place to work.
Just how could two planes collide on the runway? Two planes have collided on a runway at LAX. An investigation by the National Transportation Safety Board quickly finds out why.
The fault was found to be the air traffic controller working the tower at Los Angeles. forgot that she had instructed the SkyWest airplane onto the runway. She lost awareness of where that airplane was.
1493 for land runway 24 left.
Certain times of the day, the air traffic controller probably feels like their head is in a vice. On busy airports with airplanes coming and going, it's very easy for controllers to lose track of exactly where an airplane is.
It's the controller's job to keep a safe distance between aircraft. The most dangerous place is where planes are moving fast out on the runway.
When there's an airplane on approach or on takeoff for that runway, that is sacred ground. And you cannot bring any other vehicle into that sacred ground.
This is the result when that ground is violated. March 1977, at Tenerife in the Canary Islands, two Boeing 747s collide at high speed on the same runway. 583 die in the world's worst aviation disaster. Heavy fog led to miscommunication between pilots and controllers, human error, and technology failed to detect it. Controlling air traffic is one of the world's toughest jobs.
1500, cross 4 left, straight down the runway, ground point 9.
Cross Delta, you can go left Bravo, because I'll give way. Cross American and Austrian and
106, the
Qatari.
JetBlue owner is waiting for you. Cross 4 left.
Controllers at major airports, like New York's JFK, regularly handle up to 100 flights an hour. Since the 1950s, most airports have been equipped with radar systems to monitor traffic. Ground radar sends out radio waves which are reflected back from aircraft. The plane's position can then be tracked by the tower. But controllers must manually match every radar blip with each plane's call sign. Hard work at rush hour. Worse, the radar signals can be deflected by heavy rain, snow, and fog.
Surface radar as we have it today does have some limitations. There are blackout spots that it doesn't return very well. There are false signals sometimes.
But a team at Syracuse, New York has developed a life-saving solution. They call it Airport Surface Detection Equipment, or ASDX. As a plane moves across the airport, its transponder sends out data such as the flight's call sign. Sensors along runways receive the signals while constantly tracking the aircraft's movement. No blind spots, and the sensors work in all weathers. The data is relayed back to the tower and displayed on the ASDX monitor. Over a map of the airport, it continuously displays all traffic movement. Now, controllers can instantly prevent planes colliding. And they don't need to manually identify planes. This system automatically recognizes and displays each aircraft's call sign. As planes move along the runway, a series of green lines warns controllers to block other traffic. When the danger passes, the controllers can safely direct traffic across that runway. ASDX was recently installed at JFK, and today they may need it more than ever. A 757 is making an emergency landing with reports of smoke in the cockpit.
You can contact ground on 121.9. He wants the vehicles to inspect the aircraft.
Worst case, they're going to deploy chutes and also got people all over the place. So we're going to want to make sure we don't have anybody. We'll try to keep all airplanes off Alpha and Bravo.
If passengers need to evacuate the plane, controllers may have to close runways.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I know. That's
If they close a runway, the monitor displays a warning. If a plane approaches the runway, ASDX will sound a conflict alert.
Warning, runway 22 left. Go around.
In certain scenarios, it can provide as much as 15 seconds warning. In others, it can be less than 10 seconds. But what we have to understand is that even if it's less than 10 seconds, that is the difference between life and death.
ASDX will greatly reduce the risk of a tragedy like U.S. Air Flight 1493 happening again. It has now been installed at 17 airports across the nation, including LAX. None have suffered a runway collision. Today, Boeing are developing the next step in collision warning systems in the cockpit.
Here comes the 777 checks.
These pilots are testing the system on a simulated journey across fog-bound San Francisco International.
This guy's going to take off in front of us.
They turn onto runway 19 left and wait for clearance to take off.
Tower, Boeing 001. I'm waiting for takeoff clearance. Still waiting for my takeoff clearance, and I don't have it yet. But right here, there's an airplane right behind me getting ready to land. He's 2.4 miles out.
Tower, Boeing 1, we show traffic landing on runway 19 left. Do you want us to depart, sir? We've lost comm with the tower, Captain.
That's much too close for me.
Boeing 1, transmitting in the blind. We show traffic on our tail. We're exiting the runway. So within 1 mile, Captain. Miles, 0.5 miles, closing. No, that's closed.
Without the cockpit warning, disaster. Today, decades of innovations safeguard flyers against collisions on the ground and in the air, hidden fires, and runway overruns. One leg of any flight is still risky, the drive to the airport.